but Dominic Nietzsche won that one, yeah.
Yeah, Dominic Nietzsche won that. And this year, the one drop back in Las Vegas at the World Series of Poker, and the buy-in, $1 million once again.
You playing this one, Mike?
At the moment, I am not playing this one. I played the original, was fortunate to get in it, and it was exciting. It was historical. Wow. I cashed. And I played the 100,000 tournament the following year. I cashed in that as well. So 43. I'm 2 for 2 in one drops. Maybe I'll just retire at that.
Well, it looks like Kristen's raised this one up. Mateos just flat ace-king on the button.
Oh, boy.
And that's going to spell trouble for Kristen because they have both flopped a king.
And both have a lot of chips.
And there's no way she's going to put him on ace-king when he's just flat called pre-flop, Mike.
Nope. You're right.
And she does check it over to him.
Well, she's checked it for the check raise or just to keep trying to trap him.
I think, yeah, she's going to play this as a check call. And the problem for her is he has such a good hand, he's going to bet all 3 streets with. So unless some scare cards come off or a queen,
oh my gosh,
she's going to lose a lot of chips here.
Yep.
She thinks, oh, I've got him.
Yeah.
I'm just going to pretend I'm weak and he's going to bluff me off. And she doesn't realize he's sat there with top pair, top kicker.
Strange to see Kristen Bicknell checking king-queen on this board. Not only does she have top pair, she has a clear range advantage on a board that she's usually going to bet. Jonathan, what do you think is going on here with this check?
I mean, it's really surprising and interesting that she would decide to do this. My best guess is she just feels like she has to protect her checking range here against a guy as good as Adrian Mateos, so he doesn't know what she's doing. Against most players, she's probably betting this nearly 100% of the time, if not 100%. But against a guy like Mateos, if she doesn't have some good top pairs here, she only has hands like queens and jacks and ace-10 and things like that, pocket nines, pocket eights, hands that are good and can go to showdown, but necessarily can't, don't want to inflate the pot, then he's just going to destroy her because he's going to be able to put a huge amount of pressure on her anytime he feels like it. And so by keeping a hand this good in her checking range at least a little bit of the time, it makes it much harder for him to make decisions post-flop. Now, when he has ace-king, it's not as hard, admittedly.
It is not so good when he has ace-king, but it turns out to be great for her that she didn't bet. At least she's mitigating variance a little bit that way against the ace-king. I expect she's not checking all king-queens against Mateos. She's going to have some balance, bet some king-queens. We're not sure how she arrives at the conclusion to check this one. It could be the suits in her hand. It could be the suits on the flop. It could be the time on the clock. But she's definitely not checking all king-queens, but some of them. And in this case, it's probably saving her a little money so far.
Yeah, I got to believe she's betting most of her king-queens, even against Adrian.
And once he bets, of course, it's rudimentary. She has to call, right?
Yes, of course.
Speaking of having to call, you're going to have to call a doctor after you hear about this incredible tournament on Nitrogen Sports Poker. If you use the link that we tweet out when we tweet about Nitrogen Sports, you get access to this tournament that is a 0.1 millibit buy-in and a 100 millibit guarantee. That means it needs 1,000 players to meet the guarantee. Guess what? They only let in 300 every month. They're guaranteeing themselves to lose money. That means you make money.
Mateos has the most calm face, doesn't he?
A terrible turn card for Kristen.
Yeah. Kristen is going for chips, just a matter of how many. Can she control her losses?
One of the hands she might be worried about would be a set deuces now. Very, very unlikely.
He's not going to call a raise with a deuce in his hand. You're not going to put him on that. You'd think he would have raised if he had 2 tens or ace-king. That didn't happen.
So
she's checking, trapping him, thinking she's got the best hand for sure.
Yeah. The only hand she probably thinks she loses to is king 10.
And so now the bet's starting to get up there.
It looks very bluffy.
Oh boy. It's draw heavy too. Possible straight, possible flush out there.
2.2 million to bet, and she does call. So
she's
huge pot building here, Mike. Just under 8 million in there.
And if he puts her on a king, he's going to make a big wager on the river.
And, well, backdoor spades do get there, but I don't think that.
No, that's not going to play a factor of this pot. You don't figure in backdoor flushes. And I think he's going to try to get a nice bet in the river.
5.2 million.
And you're right, 5.2. He's going big.
Yep. And I don't see her getting away from this hand. I just don't see it.
She will be worried about a hand like ace-jack.
And he's going to reap all the benefits of this now. You know, he had made a big 3-bet before the flop. She's liable to throw the king-queen away. As it is, he's going to pick up another 7 or 8 million. If she calls.
Promise you that the spade is what's worrying her.
She's trying to sort it out. She's shuffling her time buttons. I'll be shocked if one or two of them don't go in the pot here. Meaning you want more time to think about this hand, and certainly she deserves more time to think about it. She's not going to have a bigger decision at this final table. She knows if
She folds.
Wow, what a laydown.
Okay.
So somehow, some way, Kristen Bicknell is able to preserve most of her stack in this spot, which looks like a complete setup for her to either go broke or, in this case, lose almost all of her chips. But somehow she doesn't. Grant, what happened?
I think a lot of things probably happened here to lead to this. I think it's possible there's even some combinatorial luck involved, which we're going to get into a bit later. But let's lay this out with the different factors involved and why she ends up folding this hand. I'm going to start with Mateos' line, the simplest reason. It's a scary line. She opened under the gun, and even so, on this board, Mateos decided to go for 3 streets, 2 of the streets being pretty big as compared to the pot. I think that's a big factor here.
Yeah, for sure, that's got to matter. Now, at the same point, Mateos, as we've mentioned, can be a little bit crazy sometimes and really go for it. He can be bluffy. And she took this very particular line, which could be inducing bluffs and trying to get her off a hand like a 10 or 2 jacks or 2 queens. So I don't know that alone is enough to fold, right?
I agree. I think
a very good hand.
It's absolutely not enough to fold in my case. So let's see if another factor is, and I think this is maybe the most compelling factor, and that is Mateos's current range advantage once he gets to the river. As played, when Bicknell goes check, call, check, she does not usually, if ever, have 2 spades in her hand, right? It's really hard to imagine a 2 spade hand. Maybe ace 10 of spades, maybe. But other than that, I can't think of any feasible spade that she could have in her hand, spade flush that she could have in her hand. And Mateos, on the other hand, has a bunch of spade flushes. Anything that he's taking on the flop and turning into a bluff, even a hand like 8-9 of spades or 7-8 of spades, if he shows up with those, if he bets those on the flop as a bluff, he's gonna continue when he picks up equity on the turn. And that, of course, applies to all of the combo draws that he picks up on the turn, like ace jack and ace queen of spades, or queen jack of spades, queen 10 of spades, maybe jack 10 of spades. There's a ton of spades in his range. He's also, by the way, really the only player in this hand that can have 2 3s in his hand and have made 3s full on the river. Bicknell doesn't have any of those hands, so there is a clear range advantage in Mateos' favor at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bicknell has a few more spades than you're saying. I think she has a few 10x of spades. So she's got ace 10 of spades, queen 10 of spades, jack 10 of spades, probably 9-10 of spades. But that's still only 4 combos. And to your point, she has very few spade combos, while Mateos has almost all of the spade combos. So, anything that he would have called with pre-flop still is going to be there by the river for sure. Like, this is the line he's going to take with those pretty much always.
Okay, so that's another factor that might lead her to think, okay, maybe I should consider folding. But then when you're playing against a player like Mateos, you can't just rely on these exploits and these thoughts. You have to know that he's going to be a guy who is going to show up with bluffs a fair amount of the time as well. So in order to make decisions in spots where you're getting put in a tough spot, you have to use distribution. So her last question to herself has to be, where does this hand land in my distribution? And that question can be asked in multiple ways. It can be asked in the way of, okay, where does it actually rank in hand rank? Like, king queen is worse than ace king, obviously, and it's better than king jack. But does it matter more that there's no spade in her hand than where she actually ranks in her hand ranks? What do you think, Jonathan?
I mean, I think that's a huge part of it. Like, I think if she has 2 queens with the queen of spades and she gets to the river, I mean, she calls the turn bet, I think she's probably calling with that because she blocks the spades. And as we would say, like, the queen of spades is such a common card when Adrian has a flush.
Right.
You can have the queen of spades there a lot. So yeah, I think that matters hugely as she's trying to determine distribution here. She clearly has some flushes, but very few. She knows if she has other big hands like full houses or not. She knows how often she has like 10s full here. And she also knows, and this is really valuable, if she has queens or jacks here, or how often.
That would be valuable for us to know, but we don't.
Yeah, we can only
guess.
guess.
That's another way she could use distribution to find a fold here, even if it's not the spade. Maybe she knows that she's playing tighter than we think, and that
right.
She doesn't actually have 2 queens in her hand or 2 jacks in her hand ever, because she's check folding the turn. And king queen or maybe king jack is the literal bottom of her range.
Right.
And she's check calling ace king, pocket aces, king 10, deuce deuce, all of those hands. If she knows that, then she might fall low enough in her distribution to make this fold without the spade even being a factor. But I think more likely it's that she doesn't have a spade in her hand, and if she did, she would make the call.
Yeah, it doesn't seem overly realistic to me that the best hand she shows up here for value is, meaning that wasn't a draw somehow on the turn, which there would be very few of anyway, of course, is King Jack. Like, it just seems crazy to take this line against a player like Mateos in this spot and just fold queens on the turn. So I gotta
agree.
believe that it's more about not having the spade.
Right. And that's what I meant when I said at the beginning of this section, the combinatorial luck. Because I think if she had the spade in her hand, she's making the call and losing the 5.2 million. But in this case, she didn't have the spade and she didn't make the call. And somehow, some way, she didn't lose the 5.2 million.
I mean, the luck works the other way too. If it's any other three besides a three of spades, now she doesn't need to block spades. I think she's way more apt to call as well.
True.
Kristen Bicknell making big folds, showing the world something. Well, she showed the world some surprising decisions here, deciding to check the flop, deciding to check fold the river. This is after Adrian Mateos didn't 3-bet his ace-king pre-flop. Also, a bit of a surprise. These are the best players in the world. What do you think about these decisions? Do you like them? Do you not like them? Do you think ultimately Kristen is losing money by check folding the river? Or do you think this is just a clear fold in this spot without the spade in your hand? Or maybe for another reason? Let us know in the comments.
We would love to hear from you. And if you're kind of thinking, how did those guys come up with all of those ideas on the river about the ways Kristen Bicknell is making this decision? That seemed like that came out of nowhere. Well, it didn't come out of nowhere. It came from our podcast where we have way more in-depth discussions and come up with all of our ideas for this show. We think the podcast is great and it's really a good learning tool and we have a lot of fun on it. It's called the Breakdown Poker Podcast presented by the Poker Guys. You can find it anywhere you get your podcasts. I highly recommend it. I'm one of the hosts.
Yeah, if you like this video, you'll definitely like the podcast. We go even deeper into the poker stuff there. And if you like this video, by the way, give us a like and of course, subscribe to our channel.